I was fifth in line, and I soon learned that at least 3 out of 4 of the people in front of me were part of the event themselves. These people were planted there by Turning Point and designated the first few spots in the Q&A. Soon after the Q&A started, a Turning Point worker came up to me and told me that the Q&A would end after the person in front of me in line. Essentially, Turning Point was going to end their Q&A before any actual students could ask questions.
There's been a lot of debate, see what I did there, about whether Charlie Kirk was pre-scripting some of these debates. And there are articles and things on it. We'll kind of dive deeper into that. But I just want you to look at a couple interactions that he has. I handpicked a few. There are thousands. So there are plenty of situations where he's professional and cordial and respectful, and the student comes around to him and all that kind of stuff, and they kind of end on the same vibe and everything else. But I want you to see the way that he kind of handles these kids and look at his face and look at his aggression and that kind of stuff. And then after that, we're going to look at Erika Kirk and the current TPUSA administration and how they're handling this situation.
Let me ask you, in the conflict of Israel versus Hamas, who's the good guy?
I believe both Hamas and the Israeli government are evil, but I think also that there is no justification.
Are they equally?
There is no justification for the murder and mutilation of thousands of innocent people and children in a futile...
Let's hear it out.
There is no justification, Mr. Kirk, for invading hospitals, for bombing innocent populations and dragging out a war which is damaging Israel and the West's security.
You've made that point, but...
Well, it's not a point, it's a moral truth, isn't it?
Okay, yeah.
The guy with the crazy hair, he's very passionate about what he's saying. And then Charlie kind of just like sarcastically is like, yeah, you made your point, and whatever, right? So he's not really listening. You know, that's kind of the vibe I get a lot from Charlie Kirk, is that he kind of hears them, but he's not trying to listen to what they're actually saying. His whole point of debating is to beat the other person. He wants the crowd to be like, oh, right? Like he wants this big reaction, and let's see where it goes.
Because 1,300 Jews were killed and 200 were taken hostage. And when you declare war on Israel, expect a firestorm in reaction. Let me finish, I let you talk.
Now, does him yelling at the guy angrily, like a father yelling at their child, is that good for a debate? Does that look professional? Does it look like he's in control of his emotions? I mean, something to think about. If you look at a lot of these debates, he does not look emotionally intelligent at any point. He's either smug, overly aggressive, or has like this kind of like sarcastic, like I know everything, you know, I'm all knowing. No matter what you say, I'm right.
Israel, at its holiest day of the calendar year besides Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, Samat Torah, the 50-year anniversary of the Six-Day War. On Shabbat, Hamas invaded Israel, deciding to go recklessly to music concerts, to homes, to kibbutzes, and taking 200 plus hostages. They knew what they were doing. In one of the most cloistered urban environments on the planet, 2 million people live in a place where it's impossible to wage war. Impossible. Where they wear civilian clothing, they violate every tenet of the Geneva Convention, and the IDF, when they do something right, they get no credit. When they do life-saving surgeries of a Gazan child, they get no credit. When they drop leaflets, they get no credit. But when they happen to bomb a place where they are operating their military from, which we now know from third-party verified sources, hundreds of Hamas military operations are in mosques, schools, and hospitals. I'm sorry, the country where they were living in relative peace on October 6th, that all of a sudden we had a war, and Hamas started the war. And I don't see people that were really upset about the 2 million Germans that were killed in World War II, civilians. A tragic truth of war is that civilians die. I don't like it, and you don't like it. And they brought it upon themselves.
His insinuation is that the military that is using these hospitals and schools and other places to use citizens as a shield is the citizens' fault. He says they brought it upon themselves. So is he saying that the military there brought it upon themselves and therefore the citizens suffer for it?
Is the leadership of Hamas, not the Israeli government, for fighting this defensive war after they were invaded. There is a good guy and there is a bad guy. I honestly...
Isn't that the morality of a child?
Well, hold on. It's interesting you say that, because a child who knows that Israel is the good guy, Hamas is bad, has a lot more wisdom than a student like yourself at Cambridge University.
Oh, now they're getting personal. Okay, let's see another one.
The only thing that happens at conception is these two cells fuse. Now, this idea that means that for some reason suddenly that moral worth comes in, but it wasn't there before when you had these 2 cells who had half the DNA. But suddenly there's a
correct. Yes, something magical happens at that.
It's not magical, Charlie. We know about this.
Well, hold on.
Charlie.
Time out. Hold on.
What you just witnessed was the moment a professional pundit, someone who had spent years rolling up to college campuses to own the libs, crash hard. Really hard. Completely abandoning his scientific justification for banning abortion, Charlie Kirk actually called conception magic, as in actual magic.
Something magical happens at that.
It's not magical, Charlie. We know about this.
This is a man who built his career on sounding confident and bulldozing opponents, as if he had a PhD in every subject. Yet here he was, fumbling over basic biology, while a kind Cambridge medical student calmly explained the science that any first-year student would know.
You say magical as in, oh, it's beautiful, it's an incredible thing that happens, of course.
You see how nervous and uncomfortable Charlie is? Now, this is a situation where you don't debate a subject that you're not an expert in, but Charlie would debate anyone, so I have respect for that for sure. But this student basically tears him apart, right? And this isn't the first time something similar to this has happened. Typically, when Charlie does these things, he is talking to college students. They say it's unplanned. We're going to look into that here in a second. But typically what happens is a student comes up, they're emotional, they say dumb things, Charlie roasts them, the crowd is like cheering, and, you know, it seems as though he won, right? Just because he roasted them. But that's not reality, right? So how much of this is actually true debate and how much of it is theatrics?
Those little chuckles, that is the sound of Charlie losing the room. And to notice that he doesn't handle it well.
Okay, you guys can laugh. I mean, it's true. I mean,
that defensive acknowledgement is quite revealing. There's nothing quite like watching him nervously explain why everyone shouldn't be laughing. Remember, this was a guy used to stacking the deck, debating less informed opponents in front of crowds of sycophants nodding along. Here, there's no such comfort blanket, and you can tell that he really wasn't ready for it.
This here is more typical what Charlie would run into. It was these very, very passionate, typically, you know, liberal or opposite side of the aisle people. And they would come in, they were nervous, right? And then they would say their piece, and then he would basically rudely dismantle them.
Do you feel proud of yourself for debating college kids who are unprepared to speak in front of an audience like yourself? Hold on. You're 30 years old. We can agree you're 30 years old, right? Do you think that's a little bit silly?
Are you a voter?
I am a voter. I'm a registered
I
voter.
vote and you vote. So I'm talking to voters of this country that will determine the future of Western.
If you debate a 18-year-old voter versus a 50-year-old voter, who do you think is going to be more well-informed? You have a lifetime of experience. So I don't buy that as a good argument, but let's keep going.
Civilization. That's what I'm doing here today. Yeah? Wait, hold on. How is it any different than a professor talking to you?
Then a professor talking to you? Who are you?
Well, important enough for you to come up to a microphone.
You create a company that's like close to being a fascist, and then like,
Okay. How am I?
Sorry.
Let's go through this. How am I a fascist?
No, dude, like you.
Can you name one thing I believe that's fascist?
You believe that like you are.
It seems as though it's somewhat of a humiliation ritual for the other side. Anyone that challenges him, anyone that comes up, obviously most of them are unprepared, but we're going to see here in a minute, it looks like a lot of them are prepared. And really quick, make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe and share this around. And moving on to the next piece, during Charlie's era, there was a lot of what we just saw. It was students would come up, he would try and dismantle them, he would try to get the crowd to get excited and kind of boo them and things like that. And whether that was his actual intention, that's what often happened. And then as we saw in a couple cases when he went to speak to more informed, more intelligent students, he didn't fare so well. But what we're going to look at next is TPUSA and their events and how they typically set things up. And there's some allegations that are kind of interesting.
Turning Point tried to silence me and its opposition, and here is the full story. Yesterday, Turning Point held an event at my school, George Washington University, featuring Erika Kirk and Caroline Levitt. And GW students were promised a Q&A at the end of the event. When people started lining up for the Q&A, I got in line. I was fifth in line, and I soon learned that at least 3 out of 4 of the people in front of me were part of the event themselves. These people were planted there by Turning Point and designated the first few spots in the Q&A. Soon after the Q&A started, a Turning Point worker came up to me and told me that the Q&A would end after the person in front of me in line. Essentially, Turning Point was going to end their Q&A before any actual students could ask questions. Keep in mind that this event up to this point was 2 hours of nonstop conservative rhetoric, despite half of the audience being GW students that didn't agree with the administration. So, an organization that claims to believe in freedom of speech and healthy disagreement was going to refuse to let half of their audience have their voices heard. But the crowd did not let that happen. After they ended the Q&A, the crowd erupted to let me ask my question to at least have one student's opinion be heard. And they didn't even give me a mic for half of my question. I had to shout at the top of my lungs for the only 2 minutes of the 2-hour show where someone could voice the concerns of millions of American people. And while yes, I understand that they are running out of time for the event, my question is why in an event that was supposed to uplift GW students' voices did we designate the first 3 spots of the Q&A to people planted there by Turning Point themselves?
As you can see there, the accusation is that they're planting these students that are asking questions, okay? And that's a serious thing because they're talking about, like you said, freedom of speech and all these different things. But I will say, it does seem like this Ryan Caldwell somewhat of a professional activist, maybe even like a journalist. And he's a student, but he's showing up at these events and seems to do these little reports afterwards, just like tearing them down. But the accusation here is that they're rigging these debates. They're rigging these Q&A sessions. And this here was him during asking his question.
Anything that we can be praying. I can't see.
One more?
You want to take one more?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take one more. Sorry.
Please.
We're just really running over, so that's the only way. Go ahead.
All right, I'll speak loudly. My name is Ryan Caldwell. I go to GW. My question is about the Save America Act.
Yes.
Who do not.
I'm glad you're calling it. It is the Save America Act,
Amen.
not the Save Act.
An act that requires various forms of ID and proofs of citizenship in order to prevent voter fraud. However, voter fraud is incredibly rare. According to, thank you.
Hold on.
According to the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative database, by the way, there have only been a few hundred cases of voter fraud since 1982 out of hundreds of millions of votes. Additionally, according to the Brennan Institute of Justice, there are 21.8 million Americans who do not have easy access to proofs of citizenship. So my question to you is it worth it to risk millions of Americans from voting in order to prevent a few hundred cases of voter fraud?
Now, one thing I want to talk about here really quick is just that claim, you know, that 23.8 million Americans don't have access to their citizenship information. Is that true? I mean, he put a little thing on the screen, but if you couldn't prove your citizenship, you wouldn't be able to survive or really function here unless you were doing it illegally, right? I don't know about that, but the whole point here is that he's basically yelling. He doesn't even have a microphone, you said, for the first half of the conversation. And you see how they interrupted him right away? The Save America Act, I'm glad you said that. So it's interesting, but they did let him speak.
First of all, thank you for the question. No need to boo. It's an honest question. I'm happy to give you an honest answer. First of all, I have not seen the data you provided, so I'd like to go check it myself and make sure that it's actually accurate in the way that you're citing it. And there is certainly much more, I believe, voter fraud in this country, and I'm sure the statistics back it up, than what you cited with one survey. And why are you okay with any voter fraud in the United States of America?
I think it's great that different people with opposing opinions get to ask questions and talk and that kind of stuff. But the thing that's interesting is he said earlier the accusation was that they were handpicking these students. What we're about to see now is Ryan Caldwell asking a question to J.D. Vance. Now, this is where Erika Kirk did not show up. This is where she was saying there was a security threat. And then just a day or two later, she's hanging out with Trump, doing a full event with all the music and everything else, right? It does seem as though whatever that threat was figured out. But I just want to point out here that this lady, she is watching him the whole time that he's asking his question. He claimed as well, which I think we'll look at that video here in a second, that she wanted to see his questions on his phone. So she wanted to pre-screen what he was going to ask. She was very, very concerned about what he would say to them. So that's interesting, considering that this is supposed to be free speech, not controlled speech, not pre-screened speech, right? So let's keep watching.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vice President, and coming to UGA and allowing us to express our freedom of speech. So thank you so much. The First Lady said was not acting alone and had to be held accountable. She said and called for a congressional hearing, but President Trump multiple times called the files a hoax. The acting attorney general said Epstein shouldn't be a part of anything at the DOJ. If there are compromised government officials in those files, how can the public trust that this administration will hold anyone accountable when its own Justice Department is actively blocking the investigation? Given that, can you clearly articulate your stance on whether federal entities should have a formal investigation? Thank you.
Yeah. So first of all, you said the Associate Attorney General or something. I haven't seen that quote, but here's my view on the Epstein matter. Number one, the guy was clearly a scumbag. Okay. Number two, he clearly had extraordinary connections, both with intelligence services, both inside the United States and outside the United States, and also with a lot of very wealthy and powerful people. Okay. Number three, I have been a firm advocate and will continue to be a firm advocate of where we have something, and you know, like, I'm probably more obsessed with this than most officials. Okay.
All right. So we'll stop it there, but you get the idea. So he asks a question, JD answers it. You can see he's being respectful. He's doing a little of the political thing, right? He's kind of dancing around it a little bit. He's saying clearly he's a scumbag, but now let me confuse you with a bunch of other stuff that's unrelated. But it's very interesting that, you know, this kid's respectful. You know, I say kid, I don't know how old he is, but he's respectful in his questions and that kind of stuff. But it's interesting. He said the 4 students before him seemed to be handpicked. They were wearing TPUSA like lanyards, as though they were like students or someone that was like pre-chosen for this. And then he said him and like 20 people behind him weren't really getting a chance to ask a question. And he basically had to keep fighting to ask a question, kind of similar to the Erika Kirk event with Carolyn Levitt.
What would you tell her? Stop.
I would say that I am disappointed in how her organization now, Turning Point, is handling freedom of speech. Because one thing that I did really respect about Charlie Kirk was the fact that he did value freedom of speech, and he did go and he talked to people that he disagreed with. And that is something that just seems to be partially lost. And, you know, with this event, I've talked about it some, but just to clarify even more, the people that went before me in the Q&A, they were part of the event themselves, and they were designated those spots in line for the Q&A as well. At least 3 out of 4 of them. I'm not positive on the 4th, but at least 3 out of 4 of them. And so they're designating the spots, and also at least half of them were not GW students either. They're designating the spots to ask their panelists, to people that they know support the administration, in a situation where they also know that they have limited time.
Now, this is his claim. This is what he says he saw, but I don't know the rules. I don't know if they can ask questions if they're a non-GW student. I don't know if at these events they do a mixture of outside people, students, and people from TPUSA. I have no idea, but it's interesting. I don't know if that was the formula before when Charlie was CEO, but it does seem as though having pre-picked, pre-chosen people asking pre-scripted questions doesn't really go well with the whole point of what TPUSA was supposed to be doing and the whole point of having open debate. And then really quick here, I wanted to see if there was evidence of any of this before, when Charlie was CEO. Several opinion pieces and commentaries from 2025 explicitly describe the events as rigged, staged, fixed, or a manufactured performance, rather than truly open, random student Q&A. These critiques focus on the format's built-in advantages for Kirk, preparation, editing, rhetorical tactics, and in at least one case, claim pre-selected or screened questions participants instead of random students. The claims come from critical journalists, columnists, student witnesses on social media, and post-event analysis. TPUSA has always marketed the tours as open, prove me wrong tables, mics for any student. This is the key reports. Rigged debates and manufactured victories, the Charlie Kirk model. Directly calls the Prove Me Wrong set up a rigged game and carefully orchestrated show where what looked like open discourse was actually a rigged game where Kirk held all the advantages. It argues the outcome was predetermined. Debunking the Charlie Kirk campus spectacle. Labels the tours as a carefully staged performance and rigged performance that produced manufactured victories. Students were props for viral clips. The format was misleading from the start, and Kirk knew topics, questions in advance by using leading questions and interruptions. How Charlie Kirk mastered the illusion of stump debates. Calls it a rigged performance and illusion. Kirk's professional preparation versus random unprepared students made the outcome predetermined. The prove me wrong framing suggests openness but prevented real challenges through controlled tactics. Leading questions, rapid fire interruptions. And the cowardice of Charlie Kirk, most direct on handpicking, states that the traveling fun show events, there weren't real debates, but instead pre-selected questions to which Kirk had prepared talking points. Social media and student witnesses report, often cited in the pieces or shared alongside them, during the tours, Facebook groups, and local pages, alleged that TPUSA used a screener who pre-selected participants, and we saw that with Ryan Caldwell with that woman standing next to him. He specifically said that she not only wanted to know the question, she wanted to see what was on his phone. She wanted to see the question that was on his actual telephone, which is a privacy issue, right, first of all. And then second of all, if it's open dialogue, then you should be able to ask any question, not just pre-screened ones, okay? And they were asking the students for their questions in advance and fed them to Kirk so he had ready responses. Now that to me is not an open speech platform, that is an engine. These claims circulated as eyewitness accounts from attendees who said the open mic line was managed, not first come, first served random students. Similar posts tied to this viral edited video. These 2025 critiques often link the format's fixed nature to Kirk's editing team cherry-picking clips and the unequal power dynamic. So why does all this matter? Well, we have this student, Ryan Caldwell, who has been to multiple events, and at each event he's kind of seeing the same thing. He says, this is his allegation, that they are hand-picking people before they even start the Q&A, and those people are either with or working for or have some kind of association to Turning Point USA. So it's pre-scripted, right? And then when they get to the point where they're supposed to actually have students interact, they're trying to cut them off. And in both cases, it seemed as though he had to fight to get his question asked. It's very interesting from an organization that Charlie and the organization previously prided themselves on open dialogue, right? Prove me wrong. I'll talk to anybody, anyone about any subject. And as we saw in a lot of cases, it was Charlie Kirk dismantling the student disrespectfully. A lot of times the students would get disrespectful too, right? So it was back and forth. But the way that he did it was not a respectful debate. It was typically ad hominem attacks. It was sarcastic. It was, I know everything, you don't know anything type of rhetoric. And in a lot of cases, it was kind of like these one-liners, right? It's almost like he's doing like a stand-up routine. That doesn't seem like a healthy environment for debate. And then when he went somewhere with people who were very educated, when he went to Cambridge, he kind of got picked apart. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Do you think that the Charlie Kirk TPUSA and the Erika Kirk TPUSA are the same? Do you think that the debates and the way they're handling these Q&A and stuff are the same pattern? It's just a different CEO? And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this around. And if you want to support the channel, there are ways to do so down in the description. And I'll see you on the next one.